Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, Ian, we need to talk about your flair. This is Office Space. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Office Space, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
You know what? Aside from being called out for my pieces of flair, I was going to bring something positive to how am I feeling this week.
Oh.
Back in March, I changed my eating habits. I tried to cut out sugar, carbs.
Yeah.
Managed to stay on that track, and that's my little positive thing. You know, I'm down about 15 pounds. I think I look better. I mean, that's a personal opinion, but I'm fitting into some old underpants that were too tight for me for a while.
There you go.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats.
Thank you.
Kudos. That's excellent news.
Yeah.
Bringing some positivity. Now, if you could just get your flair figured out, everything will be going smooth.
I mean, I'm doing the minimum. If you want to make the Blast Zone minimum higher, just say so. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired today.
Okay.
It is Friday, and last night I went to an Action Bronson concert.
Oh, boy.
In New Haven. If any Blastoids were at College Street Music Theater last night for the Action Bronson show, you were sharing the room with me. It's a good show. A little shorter than I would have expected.
Oh, okay.
He also had a country band open for him,
Oh.
which is not what I would have expected. But then the lead singer of the country band and the guitarist is famous hip-hop producer and frequent Action Bronson collaborator Party Supplies.
Okay.
So that was
The name doesn't...
it all kind of made sense at that. Yeah, he's not super popular, but he made like a lot of beats out of royalty-free music from like YouTube, like old commercial jingles and stuff. It was interesting.
Oh, that's a cool gimmick. I like that.
His stuff is fun if you're interested in checking it out. He produced all of the first two Blue Chips albums, or mixtapes, I guess they were rather, for Action Bronson. So you can get a good sense of his style on that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then we went to a little jazz funk bar. After that, there's a band playing some good old R&B covers.
Oh, neat. But that is a big night for a Thursday night. That's a lot of action, so to speak.
Oh, wordplay. But worth it. Just a little tired today. So if my energy level feels lower, it's not because I didn't like this movie. It's just because I am sleepyhead.
I'm sure it's not that.
Yes. Office Space. Absolute classic, but we can't get into it yet because you got to tell me what you watched this week.
So after all the buzz, I had to watch the new atomic bomb movie that just came out, and it's a lot more twee than you'd think. I'm not talking about Oppenheimer, of course. I'm talking about Wes Anderson's Asteroid City.
Oh, yeah.
I am a dabbler in Wes Anderson. I've seen maybe half his movies at most. I like The French Dispatch when that came out, and I like this one. I think I'm being won over more and more into Wes Anderson land. I kind of find it weird that the popular criticism is that his movies have too much of a style, because to me, that's like a plus. I like the feeling that you turn on the movie, you get the idea that he knows exactly what he's doing, as a specific thing he's doing, the way he's telling a story, the way he's crafting his characters. And like that confidence in it, to me, is reassuring. I'll let him sweep me into the story. I'm ready to hand myself over and see where these quirky characters take me.
Yeah. Since when is auteurism a bad thing?
I guess it's just easy to spot. So it's easy for people to make fun of. And it's also silly. Like, you're not telling him anything that his movies are lighthearted and quirky. Yeah, that's kind of what he was going for. But yeah, his style is a kind of escapism. And I find it pretty refreshing, because a lot of our other options for escapism are either dark, violent action stuff or like superhero movies, which are running kind of thin at this point. Although I still like that genre, but it's fun to have a Wes genre to turn to as an alternative.
And we're seeing the superhero movies have less and less success too at the box office.
Yeah, everybody might be feeling worn out.
We're going to need some alternative means of entertainment at the theater. I, for one, I wouldn't say I'm a Wes Anderson fan. I enjoy his movies, but I don't seek them out. I'm not like in line on opening weekend, but I guess I would say that I respect his movies more than I like them. I think they need to exist. It can't all be these big effect-driven monstrosities. We need quieter films once in a while.
Yeah.
Which is a funny thing to say about a movie about an atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb kind of goes off in the background. They don't get all worked up over it like a certain Mr. Nolan thinks it's such a big deal.
Yeah, come on, get over it, guys. It's just an atomic bomb. I think everyone who listens to this podcast knew what I was going to talk about today when we got in the booth, because our boy is back. Our mainest man, Mr. Raylan Givens, is back. Justified City Primeval premiered this week.
They brought him back
with 2 episodes.
Okay.
So we get a double serving of Raylan. But it's not just Raylan. I mean, he's the only one that's back. There's literally no other characters. Or I guess his daughter was a character at the very end of the show, but she's like a teenager now.
Oh, interesting.
So show.
Okay.
And it's played by Timothy Olyphant's real life daughter.
Oh, that's fun for them.
I don't really have a read on her acting style and or character yet.
Okay.
But Raylan ends up in Detroit on a case involving the Oklahoma wild man, Clement Mansell, which if you've read City Primeval, he will be near and dear to your heart as one of Elmore Leonard's great villains.
Oh, neat.
And the homie Boyd Holbrook is playing him. Like a guy that really, it blows my mind. He was never actually in Justified, and like they're writing that wrong now. He's just a perfect fit, and watching him and Olyphant go back and forth is going to be a pleasure.
Yeah, that's neat.
But let's get some business out of the way here because, as you know, we enjoy our Justified crossover of the week. But to keep things above board, we're going to limit the crossovers to the original series. There's just too much, the Justified crossover. It's a City Primeval. I don't want to have to go explaining it any deeper than this guy was unjustified and also in this movie. So we're not including anyone from City Primeval unless maybe they start bringing back some older characters. Time will tell.
That's fair.
But as of now, there's nobody.
I think that helps our fans know that if they come here for Justified crossover, they're getting the real thing. They're getting traditional, pure Justified crossover, not a warmed over rehash. Not to say that the show's not going to be good quality, but it's not the same thing.
No, so far, 2 episodes in, the quality is there. And it's doing a good job of tackling some things that the show ended up getting criticized for after its run was over. Like Raylan, he's not a cop. He's a U.S. deputy marshal, but he does shoot quite a few people throughout the course of the show. And I don't know that the original series did a great job of grappling with the fact that this guy shoots somebody almost every week. But with so much that's gone on in the world of police brutality between 2011 and now, or whenever the show went off the air, I can't remember. They're addressing it. Some of his old tactics aren't going to fly anymore, which I thought was smart, a good way to kind of bring it up to the modern day setting.
It seems like that's the right thing to do. So have your character reckon with the world at large. Seems more in touch.
Speaking of reckoning with the world at large, Office Space. Ian, what is your memory of this movie? When did you first see it? And when did you first realize that it was a classic?
I tried to remember. I didn't see this in theaters, but I picked up on the wave when it got to home video. And like everybody else, I thought it was great right away as soon as I got the chance to see it. It's one of those movies where at the time it felt like for I don't know how long, a year or two, it just dominated the zeitgeist, as they say. Everybody was saying shit like no talent ass clown constantly. Like you couldn't have a conversation without an Office Space.
I believe you have my stapler.
So many things. O-Face, that was one of the more annoying things that dudes picked up on. And
said by the most annoying character in the movie.
That character was already too much to take, and it was your friends who vibed with that guy that picked that up and ran with it.
Maybe you need better friends. Maybe we all do. I was definitely too young to see this in theaters or even right when it first hit home video, but I can't remember when it happened, but it became like a fixture of my life in a way that a lot of these movies we talk about were, that I just watched them pretty constantly on a loop. And I was probably like 13, watched them like, office work. It's the worst, right? What the fuck do I know? But, I think even in school age, you can relate to some of what these characters are going through. Yeah. It rings true for anybody who's kind of forced to be somewhere for a large chunk of their day that they don't want to necessarily be at.
Sure. It's not too different, that feeling of being trapped at school, being trapped in an office job like this.
Exactly. So it was a really eye-opening movie for me in terms of understanding what satire is. And the jokes don't necessarily have to be shouted at you to know that comedy is happening. Like a deadpan style like this movie runs with was kind of new to me at the time. And it came to inform a lot of what I like about comedy.
Yeah, it's influential in so many ways because the content of it, workplace satire, set the bar for decades after that. But also stylistically, it's so well done. It's quite a movie. And coming back to it after all this time, unlike you, I hadn't seen it 1,000 times. I'd only probably seen it a handful. But still, like all the quotes were super familiar to me. But I had a sort of a freshness that it wasn't worn out like it probably was in the early 2000s. And so I just laughed and laughed at some of these jokes that are like, you can kind of maybe only smirk at it after you've seen them 1,000 times.
That's kind of what we talked about off mic. I did say, as much as I enjoyed going back and watching this movie, I only laughed out loud a couple times. Like I was smiling and enjoying myself and having a good time. And I was like, I did the Mandy Moore on Scrubs thing. Like, that's so funny. But I didn't necessarily LMAO or LOL. But like to walk away from it and still be like, what a funny movie, even though I didn't laugh uproariously at any one moment, just gives you an idea of like how good the writing is.
I was thinking about that too after we talked about it, because I watched it again and then I still laughed. The stuff that like should be, it's like there's a feeling that you don't usually articulate, but your uncle has his favorite funny story and you love it and it's hilarious, but you've heard it so many times you can't crack up laughing over it, but it can make you feel good to hear it again. There's no surprises in the scene where they're smashing the printer. So like, why am I laughing out loud at the end of that scene, like at the final blow? Or maybe it's just me. I might be in a good state of mind to revisit this movie.
Do you relate to Michael Bolton of the film much that
I do? Actually, I love that guy. We'll talk about him when we get into the details, but I loved him. I loved everybody more than I remembered liking them before.
Except Chip. We don't like Chip, the O-Face guy.
Oh, Chip is the O-Face guy. Yes, thank you. He's still hard to swallow, but
he's playing his part well. Like, that's what he's supposed to do.
It's such a dude. You're like, I know that dude. I forgot what his name was at my high school, but he was definitely there.
Well, even if you remember, there's no need to...
no need to call him out.
No need to call him out on air. When I'm the voice of reason, things have gone sideways. Do you want me to get into the making of the movie a little bit, though? Explain how it got made?
How did this thing happen?
All right. As the creator of beloved duo Beavis and Butthead, Mike Judge already had some cool kid cred in the movie and TV industry. He even made a cameo in 1994's Best Picture winner Airheads. But before working in Hollywood, Judge had a brief stint as an engineer in Silicon Valley and found the experience so miserable he wrote a series of animated short films focusing on a character named Milton, a mumbly office drone. Imagine Dilbert if the creator wasn't completely insane.
I can't imagine that. What do I look like, Walt Disney?
He would turn his short films into a treatment for a live-action movie script in 1996, and Fox president Tom Rothman called it the most brilliant workplace satire I'd ever read. Judge had the green light to begin casting his movie, but that came with its own problems. Hot off the success of Good Will Hunting, the studio urged Judge to cast either Matt Damon or Ben Affleck in the lead role of Peter Gibbons, but he felt the part would be more impactful if a less well-known actor was in it. He was impressed by Ron Livingston's audition and offered him the part instead. He did get his big name when Jennifer Aniston, at the time most well known for Friends and looking to break into more movies, agreed to star as the film's love interest Joanna.
She was looking for a break.
David Herman was Judge's only choice for the character of Michael Bolton, and Ajay Naudi was quickly cast as Samir. Much of the film's lasting power is attributed to the characters of Milton and Bill Lumbergh, played perfectly by relative unknowns at the time Stephen Root and Gary Cole.
We were told we could become comedy classics at a reasonable volume.
Diedrich Bader was cast as Peter's next-door neighbor Lawrence, a role both Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn had auditioned for, and the cast was ready. Filming began in May of 1998 in Austin, Texas, but there were problems there almost immediately as well. There were fires ravaging Mexico at the time, and the smoke from them was visible in shots. The temperatures also rose to well over 100 degrees for several days in a row, and studio executives were not happy with the footage they were seeing, calling for more energetic takes. Judge replied that they were filming the early scenes first, before Peter's hypnosis, and so he should look tired and sullen in those shots.
So every shot you see me in, that's the worst shot of my life.
Rothman also had issues with the soundtrack of the film, objecting to the prevalent use of gangster rap. Judge agreed to change the songs if the next focus group had a problem with them, but they liked it, and so the gangster rap stayed.
Damn, it sounds good.
With filming done and post-production underway, the marketing campaign for the film began. Judge immediately had issues with the poster, featuring a worker covered in post-it notes with the tagline, "Work sucks." Judge said it looked like an Office Depot ad, and also had issues with the trailers and TV spots. Rothman would later concede that the marketing campaign was a bust, lamenting that they couldn't put Aniston on the poster as her role was too small, and also admitting that the movie's humor is tough to get across in a 15-second TV spot. The film was released on February 19th, 1999, right in the heart of Dumpuary, and it performed accordingly. It debuted in 8th place with $4.2 million in its opening weekend, and it only got worse from there. It would go on to make only $12.8 million against its $10 million budget, an absolute flop. But we all know better now, as it's considered one of the great comedies of all time, and is still constantly quoted and referenced.
Constantly. I had a couple thoughts in the things that you brought up in there. One of them is that I personally remember having a visceral negative reaction to the Post-it note man in the poster. Like when I didn't know what this movie was, I kind of assumed it was some kind of creature, like not literally. I didn't think it was a movie about a Post-it note creature, but it's sort of like, it gives you this feeling that maybe this movie has a creepy, grotesque tone that kind of spooks you instead of drawing you in when it's like a super relatable movie about people that you feel like you know. So yeah, I'm with Mike Judge on that.
The poster looks like it's either going to be, like you said, a creep fest or a zany, wacky comedy. When it's really neither of those. It's very much a subdued office satire. Even Ron Livingston said he thought that the poster looked like Big Bird. A lot of people had a problem with this. And then they later put Milton behind the guy covered in Post-it notes for the home video release to try to,
at least have a human face on there, even though it's the most, it's the least fun guy to look at. But we love him.
Stephen Root's not an ugly man.
No.
They just went through great pains to make him look like they put splotches all over his face and his thick Coke bottle glasses and just his terrible hair in this movie.
Yeah.
They really tried to make him look like a beaten down office drone. And Lord, did he play the part.
Yeah. Did you mention about the Milton shorts?
Just a throwaway line.
Because I didn't see them on SNL at the time, but in essence, this movie ends up being yet another 90s SNL adaptation, right? Of which
it's by far the best one then.
Yeah. So like you wouldn't think of it. It kind of stands out for being so good. But to me, the key point is that Judge made this brilliant, really important important choice to make Milton a side character, a running side gag, a character who has big implications in the end of the story, but to create a relatable main character and make that movie about that versus so many of those SNL character movies were like a character that's already been pumped up to this insane level to make him funny in a sketch. And then it's like, now we got to live with him for 90 minutes and it's hard. And
look no further than It's Pat.
Yeah.
It's like a movie where they just a premise that could not support a 90-minute movie. And the original ask from the studio was to write a movie about Milton. And Judge famously replied, you don't want to see what this guy does when he's at his home after work. So that's why they kept him in the background and made Peter the protagonist.
Smart choice. Mike Judge, pretty brilliant. Like there's so much good comedy. There's so many good observations in here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everything.
What's the deal with TPS reports?
Every scene gives you something that you laugh at and you go, oh my God, yes, that's a thing that happens at work, or that's a way people are, or that's a frustration that I deal with in daily life that I haven't seen on screen before. Do you think that was easier to do in the 90s? Is that why a lot of people had great success, or are they just smarter than us?
Can it be both?
It could be both.
I think it's probably a little bit of both.
But it feels like everything's been observed now. Like you can't just go, you know how the printer says PC load letter? Because like it's out there. It's out of the bottle.
Now we have to ask ourselves the important questions like, is Baby Gronk the new Drip King, or is he just getting rizzed up by Livy?
That's true. It's kind of the same thing.
Those are the observations we make in our lives in 2023. If that doesn't make you want to run the car in your garage with all the doors shut, then I don't know what does.
It's sadder and sadder.
Yeah. In this movie, we had this as a note for the end of the first act, but I think we can talk about it before we even start talking about the plot piece by piece, is that the kind of mundanity of office culture and the desire to work in a space that's more comfortable for you, whether it's your home or you go to a WeWork setup or a cafe or whatever, like the freedom to kind of do your work in places besides a fucking gray cubicle has been a pretty heated debate since at least 2020 and probably before then. But
yeah,
it really ramped up, obviously, with the emergence of COVID.
Yeah. And those of us who've been privileged enough, first of all, to have white collar jobs where you might work in a cubicle and then to escape that and to have the freedom to work from more pleasant, less soul crushing environments. That's a privilege. And it leaves me asking, do these things still exist today? Is this a battle that we're still fighting? Cubicle farms? I have to think yes.
Absolutely. And I wonder how much of it is tied to like office rentals, and this company signed a 5-year lease. So,
yeah.
Well, we really think everyone's more productive when they come into the office. No, you just don't want to pay your early termination penalty on your lease or whatever. It's so transparent.
I guess it was emerging then. Someone else pointed this out to me that in the same year this movie came out, 1999, there were 2 other movies featuring cubicle workers. At least one of them was also a software engineer. Matrix and Fight Club came out the same year, and they kind of dealt with the same issue from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, in Fight Club, he was not a software engineer. So you're talking about the Matrix there. He was was he like an insurance assessor for a car company? Like he would look at accidents and see if the car was at fault or something like that. I remember. I haven't seen Fight Club in a really long time.
Yeah,
but,
me either.
Maybe we'll talk about it someday.
Ooh.
Yeah. That was one that bombed really hard in the US, but did okay in the rest of the world. So we don't typically talk about it. We've been toying with the idea of focusing on some movies in that vein.
Yeah, giving ourselves another category to open up there. If it lets us get fun movies like that, that would be interesting.
Look, it's our fucking podcast. We want to talk about a movie. We're going to talk about it, all right?
We got to check the rule book. Who makes the rules?
We do, Ian.
No, okay.
You sound like Tom right now from the movie Office Space. All right, you want to get into the plot a little bit?
Sure. Peter Gibbons, played by Ron Livingston, is a computer programmer at a tech company called Initech. He hates his boring life, his meaningless job, and his passive-aggressive boss, Bill Lumberg, played by Gary Cole. To make things worse, Initech has just hired a pair of consultants named Bob and Bob to evaluate the staff's efficiency, which everyone fears means layoffs are coming. Then Peter goes to an occupational hypnotherapist who agrees to help him forget his stress, but the guy dies right in the middle of their session, leaving Peter stuck in a deeply relaxed trance. Over the following days, in his newfound state of supreme chill, Peter feels free to ignore his boss's repeated requests to come into work on the weekend, and when his girlfriend breaks up with him and tells him she's been cheating, he shrugs it off without a care.
I do want to, right off the bat, shout out the names of all these companies that come up throughout the movie because they're so good. Initech, isn't like Initrobe another one? They really nailed kind of the copy and paste, take a prefix and a suffix, whether they make sense together, just kind of shove them together.
In that 90s way, it was before the Web 2.0 naming style came around. So this is like old fashioned, one slight generation older, but it's super corny.
It sucks, but it feels true to life.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of great observations. You know, Mike Judge spent spent some time in and around this culture and absorbed a lot of those details and was able to put them on film.
He has a real feel for even though this movie doesn't take place in Silicon Valley, he's got a real feel for that culture. His disgust with this kind of workplace is so evident, but never over the top. It's always rooted in reality to some extent. I guess you could argue the character of Milton is a little out there.
Yeah, Milton is there as extreme as the comic relief version of the character, but the rest of the stereotypes of the people in the office, they're silly. The corporate accounts payable girl who just keeps answering the phone and putting people on hold.
Corporate accounts payable, just a moment.
They're obviously comedy characters and it's heightened, but they feel real enough that you laugh, but you also grit your teeth when you meet these other characters. Like, who's the lady who gets so excited about Michael Bolton's name?
Oh, she's also the one who chastises Milton for trying to take a slice of cake to her. I don't remember her name, but she was very well cast.
Yeah.
In this movie, Judge shows almost Coen Brothers-esque skill for casting people, whether or not they look like actors. They look like the people that they're portraying. Like, you could absolutely picture all these people working in this office.
Some really great ones. Gary Cole, so good at that. And he says in interviews, it's funny, they praise each other. Mike Judge was like, Gary Cole took this idea and made it 100 times funnier. And Gary Cole goes, I just imitated the Lumbergh character that Judge had did in the shorts. So they're both very humble and praising the other about it. But it's an amazing character and it makes such an impression early on in the movie. Right away, you're like, oh my God, that guy.
Everything from his fashion to his speaking manner to his passive aggressiveness, his body language, everything about him is infuriating in the best way.
It's wonderful. And I have almost a tidbit about that. I don't know if it really qualifies, but... And this happened as soon as I saw this movie. I realized, wait, that's not just a type. I worked for Lumbergh. It wasn't his name, but I worked for this time at this call center in Sherman Oaks doing tech support for a dial-up internet company. So, this was back in the day.
It's a very old-fashioned sentence.
There was this VP that would walk around. He would wear banker's shirts, blue with the white collar.
And the white French cuffs.
And the white French cuffs, suspenders. He had big glasses. He would carry a big old coffee mug around the floor. And he was a soft-spoken dude. And he didn't give me a lot of shit ever directly, but I really feel like he's had the same kind of passive-aggressive attitude where it's always just, okay, I need you to do this.
Yeah, Peter tries so hard to head him off and be like, I know what I did wrong. I promise it won't happen again. And he still has to give him the whole fucking spiel.
Whole thing, yeah.
Maybe you worked for the inspiration. Like maybe Mike Judge also worked with that guy at some point. And that's because it seems super specific.
It was spookily similar. At that same office, once I graduated off the floor and I went into quality assurance, we had a printer in our little office. And I swear to God, it said PC load letter just constantly. You couldn't get that message off the little screen.
It's a good solid tidbit there.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Milton and Stephen Root's performance here, because for a long time after this movie, I assumed that was just like an oddball friend of Mike Judge's, and he was like, you'd be perfect for this role. And then like I'd already seen Stephen Root in other stuff by the time I realized he was Milton, because like he embodied that character so fully that when you just see him talking in his regular voice and dressed normally, like does not even seem like the same person.
What an actor. What a wonderful guy. He's a treasure. You could be forgiven for not thinking he was an actor. I remember that moment dawning on me like, oh, Stephen Root, he's an actor. He's going to do more stuff. What a thrill it is to be alive in the time when Stephen Root is taking roles in movies and TV shows.
And to see his range as an actor, you need to look no further than his appearance in Justified, because he's our Justified crossover of the week.
Justified crossover of the week.
Oh, you got me with that one.
He's a recurring role on the show. He plays the Speedo-wearing, gun-toting, sex worker soliciting Judge Mike the Hammer Reardon. So a character more different than Milton you could not conjure in your wildest dreams. And also he was the guy in The Empty Man, like very sinister and, kind of spooky. He's got range and he's like a quality barometer for me. I'm like, all right, Stephen Root's in this. It can't be that bad. Yeah. He seems to pick his scripts pretty well.
Was he the boss in News Radio? Am I pulling that one correctly out of the memory warehouse?
Oh, I always get News Radio and Spin City confused.
Oh, no.
I was like, no, it was the mayor guy. Let's see. God, he's been on so much stuff.
Yeah, he was Jimmy James, the boss in News Radio.
He was, yeah. There he is, 97 episodes. Jeez. And that was going on while this movie was being filmed.
Yeah, that led into this. So that was another thing where I probably, because I remember watching News Radio and loving it, I probably did not put it together that those were the same guys.
Love Stephen Root, but I'm going to have to go ahead and take back my comment about him being a quality barometer. I'm just looking through his filmography right now, and he's got some duds. Okay, but who doesn't?
So we remember the quality ones. That's what we'll cling to.
I was like, oh, he was great in No Country for Old Men. I forgot he was also in Drill Bit Taylor. And yeah, no.
It's a living. Yeah, you can't begrudge the guy.
He's a working actor. He's got to do what he's got to do.
Yeah.
Anywho, snuck the Justified crossover in there.
You caught me by surprise.
Bam! Mike the Hammer brought it down. But I don't know, how do you want to tackle your note about the structure here?
Probably I'll just go on a 15-minute rant where I don't stop talking and give you a chance to get a word in edgewise. No, one of the things that struck me about this is I'm kind of a structure dork, and I'm always studying screenplay writing and technique. And I like to think when I see good technique, it's the reason why the thing worked on me emotionally, not a justification for why I'm saying it's good afterwards. Like, this movie really works. I'm like, why does it work? It's got all this great structure in it. So my guru Matt Bird's definition of the setup of a story is you establish a long-standing social problem, which the movie does brilliantly. The first 10 minutes are just like how fucked up this guy's life is. And then this intimidating opportunity. First, that social problem escalates with the arrival of the consultants. And then the intimidating opportunity is this inciting incident of the hypnosis and getting stuck in it. It's over the top. It's huge. It's implausible. And yet you're like, oh my God, this just happened. And now it changes everything. And then he jumps into action as a hero. And the film just moves. It gets off the ground really well and just continues from there.
It's a really breezy movie. It's only 90 minutes. It does not feel like there's any lulls in it at all. And it really sets up the central conflict of the movie, which is, to quote Blink-182, work sucks. I know.
Yeah.
It's pretty perfectly done.
Now, we got to give Mike Judge credit for creating two pretty popular and enduring shows before this.
Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill.
Kind of some big work, but still, this movie feels like an indie film that came out of nowhere and that wasn't expected to do well. Is that like we're giving him too much credit for it being an indie when he wasn't an underdog at this point?
I don't know how much of an underdog he was, because King of the Hill was kind of in its nascent stages, right? When this movie came out.
That might have been an indie animation at the time, yeah.
Yeah, and Beavis and Butthead was on MTV. I don't even think, had Beavis and Butthead Do America come out yet? Yeah, it had. All right, so you've already done that. Yeah, I would say Hollywood was very different back then in obvious ways, but I wouldn't put him in as a stone cold underdog, but I wouldn't say like he was an established name yet. I don't think King of the Hill or Beavis and Butthead succeeded on his name, and crossing over from animation to live action, his audience probably didn't follow him, especially the Beavis and Butthead audience, because this movie seems so much more serious and dry and less goofy. I was never really a Beavis and Butthead fan, so I don't know if that's an accurate appraisal of the show, but that's kind of how I always viewed it, is that it was just like nonsense.
Yeah, me too. I'm not sure if that's fair either, but King of the Hill is a beautifully crafted sitcom structure. Beavis and Butthead at least started with just them doing bits. Like, it wasn't about plot and story and character.
It was like Mystery Science Theater, but for music videos originally.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no plot in that. It's just them being stupid. And then he jumped into this and it's like, wow, it's really good filmmaking. Like you said, it just picks you up and carries you along.
And I don't know what his experience was with live action directing either at this point, but certainly not a flashily directed movie. There's not a lot of crazy camera moves or cuts or long one takes, but it's very competently done.
Yeah. And on that, I read that he relied a lot on his cinematographer, that he came into it and said, actually, I don't know what I'm doing directing live action. Let me figure out how to shoot these scenes. And whatever he did was a good decision because it works great. If you think about it, there's not a lot of physical action. There's a lot of talking, and like Tom Rothman had problems with, there's a lot of kind of mopey talking in this. Yeah. And yet it doesn't feel blah and unenergetic at all. It moves with a nice pace.
And I want to commend Mike Judge for what you said. I didn't realize that he said that he relied on his DP or cinematographer so much, but knowing what you don't know is truly a virtue. And to be able to kind of put your ego aside and admit that you necessarily don't know what's best in that scenario is just valuable.
Worked out good.
Our craftsmen are valuable. Damn it. We support the striking workers.
Pay them what they're worth.
All the striking workers. I don't care what union.
Yeah.
That was kind of a joke, but kind of not. Yeah, but you mentioned Rothman had a problem with the tone of the movie when he was getting those early dailies. He thought Ron Livingston was on drugs and wanted to fire him because he was so like blasé. But they were like, no, we're telling him to act that way. And Ron Livingston, even later in this movie, he's pretty laid back. You can turn it on, and I've seen him in other stuff be a little more energetic. But he always struck me like he plays characters that are just take life as it comes, you know?
It's good casting. He naturally fit what this role was calling for him to do. And he is kind of bland. He has an interesting look. He looks like a cartoon drawn by Seth MacFarlane.
He looks like a caricature of Kyle Chandler.
He does. He looks kind of like a caricature, which is great for this character because this character definitely is an everyman.
But he's still handsome.
He's still handsome. He works as a leading man, but he also works as an everyman. You don't get into this movie for him. As much as I'm like, Livingston's kicking ass, he's delivering everything this movie needs, but you don't go, yeah, Peter's my guy. You might pick somebody else, like, oh, Michael Bolton's my guy, or any of these other characters. I mean, Peter does the job, which is just to represent us.
I would argue Peter's only really likable for the middle section of the movie when he's like completely in a trance, because in the first act, he's just a floor mat. He gets walked all over by everyone in his life. He's kind of a baby, complains a lot. And then in the third act, he's kind of coming out of his trance and he's like a real asshole to his girlfriend. He almost ruins his friends' lives. He's trying to rope more and more people into his scheme at every chance he gets. Like, he kind of sucks.
He has a big problem at the beginning that makes him really mopey. And then his solution seems good at first, but it all turns sour on him. He goes too far with it.
And by his solution, you mean crime.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it becomes a heist movie for a little stretch there.
You know me, I love a heist movie, and this movie, it's a pretty good one. Should I get into the second act so we could talk about the scheme in more depth?
Yeah, let's get there.
All right. When Monday rolls around, Peter is still feeling relaxed and carefree, so he goes to a local restaurant and asks out his longtime crush, a waitress named Joanna, played by Jennifer Aniston. They hit it off and make a date for later. Then when Peter stops by the office to get his address book, Lumbergh is mad and his friends Michael and Samir, played by David Herman and Ajay Naudoo, are shocked about his weekend absence, but Peter does not care. However, he is curious about the consultants, so he waltzes into his meeting with the Bobs. Peter wows them with his cool confidence and fearless truth-telling. Then he leaves work again to enjoy a few days fishing and spending time with Joanna. At this point, Lumbergh is eager to fire Peter, and he's not happy when he finds out that the Bobs actually like him. But Lumbergh can't overrule the consultants, so he takes out his frustrations by further tormenting the hapless office weirdo Milton, played by Stephen Root, who threatens under his breath to burn the building down. The next time Peter returns to the office, the Bobs meet with Peter to let him know he's getting promoted, while Michael and Samir are being let go. At this point, Peter's trance is starting to wear off, and he's infuriated to learn about the injustice. He gets together with his buddies and they hatch a plan to get back at Initech by creating a virus that will slowly siphon off fractions of a penny from every bank transaction. That Friday, as the layoffs are being announced, Peter, Michael, and Samir plant their virus in the company computers. Then they vent their anger and celebrate their revenge by driving out to a nearby field and smashing an annoying company printer to pieces with a baseball bat.
Maybe the iconic scene of the movie.
Yeah, I would say so.
It stands out because the look and feel is different than anything else. It's a visual punchline. They roll the rock way uphill. All the guys, especially Michael and Samir, how badly they hated this printer, and then give you a really satisfying payoff for it.
It's an interesting piece of filmmaking because they film it like Peter is a mob boss ordering Michael and Samir to do the dirty work. He's just kind of like pacing behind them, holding the bat. He never actually hits the printer.
Oh, okay.
Only Michael and Samir do.
That makes sense.
But he's kind of like their ringleader back there, egging them on, which makes sense thematically with the movie, and also is like he's the guy in charge. It feels like a mob movie for a hot minute, except instead of like beating up an informant or something, they're beating up a printer.
It's so well done. It really did make me laugh again after all these years.
Back up in that ass with the resurrection.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Jennifer Aniston. She's very charming in this. She's very fun. She's not in the movie a lot, which was an issue for the studio.
Is it true that they added more scenes with her and Stan, her boss, to try to flesh her out?
You know what? I hadn't heard that, but I believe it. I know she was only on set for about 2 weeks. She filmed all her scenes in about 2 weeks and was off. But the movie does need her. There's something for Peter to reach for and worry about losing, because the movie kind of takes the stakes away from Peter, because when the hypnotist dies, he doesn't give a shit about anything anymore. So he needs something that he cares about enough to worry about losing it, to kind of make the drama feel real.
Yeah, her role is great, and it is nice to get out of the office, you could say, to actually have a certain set of scenes that are set in funny restaurants, and it's like a parallel world. It's like what's fucked up about their work environment, and they do a great job with that. And I didn't know it was Mike Judge was her boss.
Neither did I. He looks really different, like nowadays.
Nowadays, yeah.
He's bald and jacked. He's trying to copy my steez.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, he's really good as Stan. You just want to punch him every time he opens his mouth, which is probably what he's going for. But I found him slightly less annoying than Joanna's coworker, who we don't get a name for as far as I know, played by Todd Duffy. He's just their obnoxiously chipper waiter at Tchotchke's, which was based on Fridays, I believe.
That sounds right, yeah.
And then there was another restaurant she goes to that's based on like Bennigan's, but then I love that there's just a Chili's too.
they throw that out. They throw a real name under the bus when they couldn't do it with Fridays. But yeah, I read that TGI Fridays later, maybe as a result of this movie, dropped their flair requirements.
Yeah, by the time I started going to TGI Fridays, which is like what every kid does when they have their first job and like you can finally afford to go out to eat with your friends, we would go to TGI Fridays. And by then it was just Fridays, and like the waiters just kind of wore like black polo shirts and jeans. Like they had dropped a lot of the theming.
Oh, that's too bad.
Probably not for them. I think they liked it.
Yeah.
I think there was just kind of like a cultural shift happening too, where the late 90s, early 2000s, people were more concerned with like being cool. Like they didn't want to dress up like a buffoon soon.
They didn't want to express themselves.
If you want to express yourself the bare minimum amount, then that's on you.
I love that. And yeah, Todd Duffy, I hate the guy, even though he did a fantastic job playing that part.
If I saw him today, I would still fight him. For like when he gives him the finger in the parking lot in Act 3.
Yeah, that's great.
He even makes that noise, I think.
He does make that noise.
And we got to talk about my boy. Another person I can't believe was never unjustified, John C. McGinley.
He has the look.
He's got the look. He's got the chops. A very interesting dude, John C. McGinley is. And I would bet money the braided leather suspenders he wears were like his choice. They're fucking disgusting, but like in the best way.
Yes. Every time he was on screen, and not that his face isn't captivating in his acting, but those brown, shiny braided leather. The braided leather belt is one thing and not very cool these days, but those suspenders are just another level of, oh my God.
Like you almost wonder if they had to have them made for the movie.
Yes.
Like it's such a specific thing.
Could you go to JCPenney in 1999 and just grab those off the rack?
I do understand the convenience of a braided belt because there's no pre-cut holes. So if your weight fluctuates, it's good. But they have belts with like buckles now that you can adjust, and not to do that, man. You don't need to wear a braided belt anymore. There's no reason.
The problem for me of the braided belt is the crinkly noise that it makes. That's kind of unbearable.
Yeah, I don't think your belt should be making a crinkly noise. So maybe just don't wear braided belts.
It's better if it doesn't.
I agree. But it's a classic John C. character. Not a guy who's had a ton of standout roles in film necessarily. He was memorable in The Rock, I remember, but didn't have a huge part. Was one of the mercenaries that takes Alcatraz hostage, I believe.
I see.
But probably most well known at this point for Scrubs.
Yeah.
Which he is Dr. Percival Cox, an absolute powerhouse on that show.
Yeah.
And could not be playing a character more different than Bob.
But Bob's still, that energy that's behind McGinley's eyes is still there. He's kind of fawning, but he's sometimes threatening in this too, the way I think of his Scrubs character as. There's this intensity in his eyes that's magnetic.
He does have an air of menace in every role, no matter what it is. And even as this kind of ineffectual office productivity consultant, he's still, you can tell there's something going on there.
And more great casting. And the other Bob is good too. I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but he doesn't star quite as much as John C., but really good casting.
They're both solid, really fun guys. There's no role in this movie where you're like, I'd prefer somebody else.
Yeah.
I can't think of a replacement that I would have enjoyed more than these guys.
And can I bring up Tom briefly?
Let's talk about Tom. We all know a Tom.
He's super stressed in the beginning. He's freaking out about the layoffs. And I was like, man, there's another character that just feels like somebody that you worked with that can't just take it easy for a second and inflicts their stress on you. And then I remember in the first time watching this being put off, like really uncomfortable in that final act when he's actually joyous. He's lost all his stress, but he's in that wheelchair with the big halo screwed into his skull. And I was disturbed. I couldn't handle Tom. It was too real.
See, I understand that impulse, but I like my job now. So I don't relate to Tom currently, but I worked a job for 6 years or something. I was at one company for 6 years. So worked a few different jobs there. I'm not going to say their name, but they're a car insurance company with a little gecko mascot.
Oh, who could that be?
And their name kind of sounds like Gecko. By far the worst place I've ever worked. There were days where I was just like, I wouldn't mind getting into a non-fatal car accident just so like I could take a week and not have to go back to that place because I needed the job for money, but I was just so fucking miserable. And he found his way out.
No,
and it's super bleak, but it is relatable.
It's kind of bleak, but his joy isn't supposed to be that sour. It's supposed to be a punchline because he's just grinning ear to ear and he looks miserable because his body is a wreck. But it's actually it's a genuine success story. He's not confused about what happened to him. He's like, yeah, I fucked up my body, but I got my will to live back and now I'm going to live a good life. So you can be happy for him. I was just somehow like he had formed an impression on me that was a little overwhelming.
That's fair. Yeah. Especially because like the movie is at its darkest when it's focused on Tom.
Yeah.
He literally tries to kill himself.
Yes.
Comes pretty close too.
He's very close. And then his sad little apology where he's playing it off with his wife that the gear shifter got stuck. That like cringy, like.
And she knows, but like, what is she going to do?
Oh my God. That's some really intense situation there. I love that. Yeah. And that's like a side story in this film. There's a lot going on.
But like also, you've worked in offices before. You've worked with Toms, I'm sure, just people who are like Chicken Little. Yeah. Every time there's like a new meeting on their calendar, like, oh, fuck, I'm getting fired.
And we call that emotional labor now that you have to take on trying to calm them down. Like, hey, dude, just chill. We're going to find out what the announcement is when we get to the staff meeting.
Yep. Emotional labor. That's such it's a real phrase and it does apply to many things, but people use it in some pretty loose ways.
I may be one of those people.
I don't think so. So let's talk about the scheme. I mean, here we get the scheme. Did you feel like it was a solid plan?
It's funny. You know that they had to cook up something to bring this movie to a head and have it more than just people complaining about their dumb job. And I love that he drops the reference, like the character acknowledges what this is. He's like, yeah, it was in Superman 3. Like, like that.
But then he goes on to say, it's an underrated movie, kind of. And that's not true. That movie sucks.
Yeah, but it's great. It inoculates you by calling itself out. It's like, okay, we're doing this. We're going with it. They know it's dumb. But in our case, it just might work. And you're like, okay, let's try it.
I mean, it does seem like a solid plan. If they're really stealing this small amount of money off every transaction, it stands to reason that they'd probably get away with it, at least for a good long while.
Especially at this company. And they make the argument, they got their heads up their asses here. They could never check the code and figure out what's going on. Because, yeah, look who they hired, whose job that would be.
One of the Bobs literally says their plan is to fire the more tenured software engineers and bring in some kids fresh out of school or ship it out to another country. So like they're looking to cut costs and, you know, get what you pay for sometimes.
I like that in the scheme, and it keeps the ball in the air just enough where you're not thinking about it too much. You know, why is this turning into a heist?
Yeah, it's mundane enough that the scheme doesn't feel out of place in this world.
And they also deflate it. There is a 1 minute slow-mo montage of them being all sneaky, and then you just stop and go, oh, that was easy. So it again acknowledges its own overinflated state for a second.
The hardest I laughed during this movie was actually during that slow-mo sequence when that woman walks by Michael's desk and she like mouths, like I didn't read her lips, but she says something about Michael Bolton.
Yes.
And he like breaks the fourth wall and looks at the camera for a long second.
Yes. Oh
it's
my
like,
God.
that's a really,
I'm glad you called that out.
If you're going to look into the camera, that's the one time it really worked.
And I realized coming back to this that I didn't really know David Herman from other stuff, but he is so good in this. I loved that. That look on his face is fantastic. Everywhere else in the movie too. I think he's just so good in this. I wish I had him in more funny movies.
Yeah, he's a very prevalent voice actor.
Okay.
But live action stuff, not as much. He was in that show Space Force. He popped up in there, I think maybe for 1 or 2 episodes. So he's still acting, but he's much more of a voice actor than a live action guy.
Well, I'm glad
he's been on all of Judge's shows. They have a close working relationship.
Well, that's good. I'm not feeling bad for the guy, but he was wonderful in this, and that look was the linchpin of the whole performance.
Amazing. All right, you want to walk us through the ending here?
All right, let's bring it home. Peter and Joanna's relationship sours when she learns about his computer virus scheme, and he finds out about her relationship history. She thinks he's unethical for stealing money, and he thinks she's unforgivable for sleeping with Lumbergh. So they have a fight, and they break up. Then Peter checks on his virus, and to his shock, it has already deposited over $300,000 in his bank account.
Eep. Sorry.
He meets up with Michael and Samir, and they freak out together, thinking that they're surely going to be caught and sent to jail. Michael admits that he probably made an error in the software, but he and Samir both blame Peter for ruining their lives. The only good news for Peter is that the guys clarify that the guy Joanna slept with was not Peter's boss Lumbergh, but an entirely different Lumbergh. So Peter decides he has to take responsibility and make everything right. He goes and humbly apologizes to Joanna, who forgives him. Then he puts $300,000 in traveler's checks and a written confession into an envelope, and he slips it under Lumbergh's office door to be found the next day. But early the next morning, before Lumbergh can arrive at work, another employee shows up in his empty office seeking a confrontation. It's Milton, who has been pushed far beyond his breaking point by a series of escalating humiliations. As Peter is heading into work to face the music, he sees that the entire Initech building has been engulfed by flames. Did Milton finally get his revenge? In any case, the fire conveniently erased all the evidence of the guy's crimes, and they get their lives back. Michael and Samir find decent new jobs at a similar tech company, but Peter decides to start over in a new career on a construction crew where he's just happy to be working outdoors. And finally, we see Milton on a beach in Mexico trying, and perhaps failing, to enjoy his newfound fortune in traveler's checks.
I guess Milton doesn't expect to live that long because $300,000, you can't retire on the beach.
You can't just go to Mexico and live on a resort. Yeah, I wonder what his plan is.
No, maybe he's just taking a little vacation, but
yeah.
Is that the most upset anyone's ever been to find $300,000 in their bank account? It must be, right?
That's a good point.
Unless you had like $800,000.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Might be even more upsetting. But yeah, it's a funny gag when you're like, oh, I wonder if there's $100 in there yet. It's $300,000. And they milk some fun out of the guys just going shit, shit, shit.
Their panic is fun. The constant referencing to, no, we're going to go to a nice resort prison, not a federal pound you in the ass prison.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons they agreed to do it, is that they thought that minimum security prison was like a vacation, and then they corrected on that.
And to be fair, I think there are some prisons that are pretty nice, but they're not for like office drones typically.
Yeah.
Like true white collar. Well, I guess what they did is textbook white collar crime.
Then they get that second scheme. This is maybe for me the weakest part, where they're like, how are we going to get out of this? We got to launder the money. And that's where I guess they think if we start doing money laundering, then we're definitely going to pound your ass prison.
It's a good gag that like nobody really knows what money laundering is in this world because they're all like dorks. They're looking it up in a dictionary, but also guys are in your 30s. You should know what money laundering is by now.
You know, they didn't have the access to all the streaming cable successful crime shows that we had in the years since.
True. Yeah, there's been a lot of
There's been a whole education just watching Narcos and things like that.
There are whole episodes in Narcos about layering. It's where you hide your money.
See, yeah.
How do you go claim it when the time comes?
And these days they had maybe a few episodes where Sonny Crockett says something about money laundering, but it's a half-assed reference.
I also feel like the money launderer is always a character in like crime shows because he's always like a little shady, or else he's taking a little extra off the top for himself. You know, Alan Ruck was an accountant for the Mexican cartel in Justified. That was his thing. He was stealing money on the side, and they came after him.
So they try to come up with their own version of that guy in this movie, and it's none other than Orlando Jones in a little cameo as Steve, who comes to the door selling magazines.
Our big buddy Orlando Jones. You may remember him from our Evolution episode, but I feel like there was better uses for him than this role.
Yeah. You at first think it's this weird offensive stereotype role, and then you realize that the character is putting on an offensive stereotype to sell magazines, but it kind of doesn't quite excuse the whole weird feeling you get. You had that same feeling?
I did, yeah. He basically lies about being a crack addict to get them to buy magazines, and when that doesn't work, he blackmails them because he knows now that they're clearly in some trouble.
It's a good joke that he was formerly a software developer who was also laid off from the sister company.
It's even better joke that he now makes better money selling magazines.
Yeah. Like that part is good, but just the whole act was like a little weird. And the movie, this is the one part where I'm like, the movie's kind of dragging now. They go in this small circle around money laundering, these few punchlines around the Steve character, and then it doesn't go anywhere. They're just like, okay, we're still here. Peter has to go. Okay, I'm going to handle it.
Although he does get 40 subscriptions to Vibe magazine out of it, right?
That's funny. Another little joke.
Why didn't he spread it around a little more? Get some variety at least if you're going to have these magazines.
Sports Illustrated, maybe.
It's something you can read. 39 of these are useless every month. Start selling them to your local bodega at a discount. But yeah, the resolution is very tidy, of course, way more so than realistic, but it's not what the movie is about.
No.
It kind of hand waves it away and it expects us to do the same, and then I'm fine with that.
I like that too, because at least it ties in. They've been using Milton as the butt of jokes for the whole movie, and so I was like, okay, this is too easy. Basically, a Deus Ex Machina flew in and rescued them from their jeopardy, but it was one we knew because it was Milton, and if you're going to do that with somebody fun that we've been with the whole time, and then you get extra meaning out of it.
And I think I read that the first reference he makes to burning the building down is like 19 minutes into the movie, which is really early on. So like they're laying that groundwork for a while.
Yeah.
Because he says it a few times.
It's in there. Everything is nicely set up and paid off in this movie.
What does it say about me that aside from the cockroaches, though, I kind of liked his little office in the storage room?
Oh, okay.
Nobody's going to tell me to turn my music down,
True.
I mean, the fact he wasn't getting a paycheck sucks. That would get old fast, but...
That's harsh. In order to justify burning the building, Lumbergh and the Bobs get pretty grotesquely cruel towards Milton. They're just laughing at his misfortune of not being paid, and they made him earn the vengeance.
And Lord did he. I was very happy for Milton to be on that beach, even though he can't even get respect from his waiter.
Was that a comment about him getting respect or him actually being a jerk? Because I felt like the waiter was nice and he was being too demanding.
I don't know, because
threatening.
The waiter was nice, but also like he got him the completely wrong drink. What did he say? He wanted a margarita and this is a Mai Tai. He wanted a Mai Tai and they brought him a margarita and he said no salt on the rim. Why would you order a Mai Tai with no salt on the rim? Because I
doesn't quite make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that felt like Stephen Root freestyling a little bit, like come up with a problem.
It could have been, but it didn't endear me to Milton or feel like more like he was put upon. I'm like, oh no, Milton's brought his problems to paradise.
I think he's just one of the least confident people in the world. And like people can sense that and kind of don't respect him.
Yeah. You feel bad. He gets shit on and you're like, he kind of brings on himself, but that's him. Speaking of trouble in paradise, I have a fan theory about the end of this movie.
Let's hear it.
So Peter and Lawrence are now working on this demolition crew together and they seem really happy. Peter's like, no, man, I'm not going back. The one thing I'm sure about in the world is that I'm happy doing this. I'm working outside. It's great, isn't it? And he's grinning and he and Lawrence are there scooping up the ashes of Initech. And just before it cuts away, there's a guy walking up behind Peter and Lawrence. And he's like a boss type. He's got a white hard hat. He's got khaki slacks on and a button-up shirt. And he's carrying a coffee cup. And he's about to come up behind them and say something to them. And I'm like, is this a hint that what Peter was saying was ironic because he's about to experience the same shit in a new job?
It could be. And I think that would be a appropriately pessimistic read on the ending. Like, but I do believe his happiness is genuine. And I don't think the movie is necessarily going to put him back in the same circumstances where it's as oppressive, but maybe just to say there's some degree of this everywhere.
I was like, okay, maybe that that was just coincidence, but I'm like, they could have shot Peter with blue sky in the background, and the last thing you see is just him taking a deep breath of fresh air. But they literally have a boss stalk up behind him and cut away just before he approaches them. Like, the judge was making some kind of point with this.
My main reason for thinking like we're not supposed to take too much away from that is that he's clearly been working this gig for a while, because Michael and Samir have their new jobs, and like they're entrenched enough to be like, we can get you a job if you
That's
want.
true.
Which, you know, that whole process he's probably been working there for at least a couple weeks. So he would have probably encountered some of the bureaucracy already. Or if he hasn't, if he has to deal with it once every 2 weeks, that's way better than his old gig.
That's true. No, I like your positivity. I don't want to leave you with this feeling like, oh no, Peter's fucked. But it's fun. I never saw that in the movie before. And it's like, oh, there's maybe another layer in it.
We're watching it with a new level of detail. We're going to catch some stuff.
That's our job.
So that's Office Space. Do you want to talk a little bit about where some of these people ended up?
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Let's start with Mike Judge himself. We already brought up, best known for Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill, but he also created the HBO hit series Silicon Valley, or Silicon Valley. I don't like, they pronounce it in a weirder way sometimes.
So I say either silicon or silicon,
that show,
whatever that is,
which ran from 2014 to 28, was very well regarded by critics, had pretty good viewership numbers. There was some reports after the fact that it was not the best set to work on by some of the more like day players, people that weren't necessarily on set every day, but would pop up and had to deal with Middletich and TJ Miller.
Oh yeah, I remember stories about both of those guys. So
yeah. So no one called out Mike Judge specifically as far as I could tell,
okay.
But as the creator, he was probably on set for some of it. It didn't seem to sully his good name so much as Middletich and Miller, who are still not working much as far as I could tell. And that's fine.
Yeah.
We already have Jesse Eisenberg. We don't need Thomas Middletich too.
It's a shame. Scratch another couple of actors off the good guy board. It'd be great if Mike Judge could stay on the good guy board. I'm pretty impressed by his ability to create some of the most enduring comedy of our lifetimes. It's pretty sick, actually.
He also directed Idiocracy, which is a revered cult classic and super bombed. It made like $400,000.
Oh shit. Are we going to do that at some point?
We will. I'm not as high on Idiocracy as I am on Office Space.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere along the time of Trump getting elected and people be like, Idiocracy is real. It's like, all right, yeah, okay.
That went too far. You're right.
Every day somebody was having that brand new observation. It's just like Idiocracy. Okay. It's not that fucking far of a leap that Americans like celebrities and might elect one day.
I think it's a movie we can sit on and come back to it when we actually start to feel some curiosity about what actually was exactly like Idiocracy and what wasn't.
If we want to talk about another Mike Judge movie in the interim, his 2009 movie Extract also bombed.
Oh, I don't even know that one.
That was, if I'm remembering correctly, Jason Bateman and Mila Kunis.
Okay.
Let me pull it up. Yeah. Oh, and Ben Affleck. He finally got his Affleck appearance. Clifton Collins Jr. I love Clifton Collins Jr.
Oh, yeah. We like him.
Kristen Wiig. Good cast.
That sounds good. I'm going to have to watch that.
It wasn't bad. I remembered liking it. They work in an extract plant, like the places that make various extracts.
Like vanilla extract?
Vanilla, like lemon, almond,
okay.
all the extracts that you would get it like for your baking goods, I believe.
Sure.
Although vanilla extract it's way cheaper to make it yourself, I found out. My mother-in-law made it herself and it was really good.
That's neat. I like
Got
that.
to soak like vanilla beans in vodka for a couple months.
Okay.
Did you know that vanilla extract has booze in it?
Yeah, it's got a little nose to it when you pop that cap.
I like to use, sorry to sidetrack, but if you're going to use, if a recipe calls for vanilla extract, I like to use vanilla bean paste instead.
Oh, okay.
Because it doesn't have the astringent kind of alcohol after flavor to it.
I
It's
see.
a little more like pure vanilla, I think gives it a nicer flavor.
Interesting. Yeah, so much of pastry and even confectionery stuff has like an alcohol component to it that I feel like it's never been my vibe, and it takes it in a direction that I don't necessarily want my desserts to go.
I'm not a big fan of making lemon cake using lemon extract. Like just use lemons, man, if you can.
Yeah.
The sole exception being my wife, Jamie, makes these almond cookies with almond extract, and they're the best cookies.
Nice.
They're not even like cookies. They almost fall apart in your hand because they're so soft.
Oh
Man, I want some now.
Yeah.
And she dusts them with powdered sugar.
Sounds great.
Anyway, so yeah, those are the 3 live action movies that he has directed. They all bombed. The only theatrical movie that he ever directed that did well was Beavis and Butthead Do America in 1996.
Okay.
That made several times over for its budget. And I remember it being a pretty funny movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. Even though I didn't like the show, I found the movie to be like, it had more of a narrative focus, obviously, because it's a movie.
Yeah.
He revived the Beavis and Butthead for the movies with Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe in 2022, but that went straight to Paramount Plus.
Oh, okay. That's why I didn't hear about it.
And it got good reviews, but obviously we can't judge its commercial performance based on that. But also King of the Hill's coming back for a revival. He's still going to voice Hank Hill and Boomhauer and all his usual characters.
Man.
So he's staying busy. It feels like every animated show is either still on the air from when I was a kid or is coming back.
Yeah. Talk about dang old Mike Judge, man.
It's pretty good. Pretty good Boomhauer.
It's It's been a while since I watched that show. I was a big fan back in the day.
Yeah, it is really good. He's also, I don't know if he pops up on Bob's Burgers, but like a lot of these actors do.
Oh, cool.
Let's see. Ron Livingston, he's had a solid career. Maybe not as big as we hoped, but he's very busy. He's been in some big productions. He was in The Flash, which, stay tuned. We'll be talking about that one at some point.
Oh, God.
It's trying to take the title from John Carter and Mortal Engines and Lone Ranger for biggest bomb of all time right now.
Wow.
It's fighting for the quote unquote honor. He was in A Million Little Things, a show that makes my wife cry, I think. That's all I know about it. It's one of those. He was on Search Party, which is a show I really want to get into, but I haven't.
I didn't even realize that. I was into season 1 of that.
He was in Loudermilk, another show like I remember hearing good things about, but never watched. He was the titular. This character's name was like Steve Loudermilk.
Okay.
It's a weird last name, but whatever.
Yeah.
I remember him. He had a good stint on Boardwalk Empire. He was good in that. He was in Band of Brothers. He was excellent in Band of Brothers because he kind of flipped his Ron Livingston persona on his head. He went from being carefree to obviously super stressed out because he's Battle of the Bulge.
Fighting for his life. Yeah. I didn't watch that, but he must have been a pretty big role because I feel like his face was in a lot of the marketing materials.
Yeah, I'd say he's like the secondary lead behind Damian Lewis, and then Neil McDonough from Justified is probably third.
Cool.
I don't think anyone needs to hear what Jennifer Aniston's been up to. She's one of the biggest stars in the world. Starring on The Morning Show, which I really liked the first season of. The second season is a show I also watched.
I did not get into that show. I tried it a little bit, but
I thought the first season was interesting and tackled some real stuff, but then it lost the plot in season 2.
Okay.
But we'll see. Season 3 is coming back fairly soon, I believe.
That's so weird. I feel like that's going on underground, but I guess that's what happens sometimes with Apple, especially. That's an Apple show?
Yeah, Apple's like, they can't have the subscriber numbers that they want to be producing these extremely expensive shows, but they're banking on the future, I guess.
It's weird. No one talks about that show anymore.
No one talks about like Silo. Like, I didn't hear anyone really talking about Silo much.
Not much. But especially to go 3 seasons deep into that was one of their launch shows, right? That was their prestige. Like, hey, we got these big names in the morning show. That's what we're launching with. And then the fact that they're still doing it, the salaries must be outrageous.
You got Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, Steve Carell in the first 2 seasons, even like Billy Crudup in kind of a smaller role, but like it got bigger in season 2.
Okay.
That's a name. You don't usually get a Billy Crudup for a small role. Like
a bunch of movie stars in a TV show.
And it's well made. And there's a little bit of like wealth porn to it. Just getting to see the apartments these people live in or the brownstones they're in. It's part of why I think people like shows like Billions and Succession is, oh, that watch he's wearing is $300,000 or that car he's driving is $4 million. There is an aspect of that to the morning show.
It kind of feels like that gives it synergy to the Apple brand, always trying to stay upscale.
True. So let's talk about David Herman now, your boy.
Yeah.
He did have a role in Idiocracy. I hope this doesn't move it up the schedule for you.
I'm going to demand it.
I need more Herman. And a few other live action roles, including Space Force, like we mentioned, but most of his work by a mile is in voice acting. So here's some of the shows he's worked on. Brickleberry, King of the Hill, Futurama, Beavis and Butthead, OKKO, Best Fiends, Slip and Jimmy, the Netflix Better Call Saul animated show that I didn't realize was real, and Bob's Burgers.
Some really big names there.
Yeah, like all the big animated shows. And I think he even appeared, I didn't put Family Guy on there because I think he was in like one episode as a really small part. I wanted to put stuff where he's actually got a recurring role, but he was even on, I think he's been on The Simpsons. He's been on Family Guy doing voices. So he's pretty much every animated show worth its weight he's popped up on.
You know, it's not a bad life. That's a pretty cool type of career to build because you don't have to get fitted with clothes, put on makeup, do stunts. You just sip your tea and go into a booth and just make funny stories.
I'm sure he has a recording studio in his house too. He probably doesn't have to leave his house very often for work, which plays into the debate we had about work from home in the first section. And then Ajay Naidoo, he's also stayed very busy. I knew his face, but then when I was going through his filmography, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember this guy and all this stuff. Okay. He was in We Crashed recently, the WeWork docudrama. He had a pretty sizable role in Dr. Death, which was a miniseries I enjoyed with Joshua Jackson, Alec Baldwin, Christian Slater about Stephen Bunch, the doctor in Texas that kept crippling his patients.
Oh, okay.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so horrible. And he's now in jail, I think, forever.
Okay.
He was on The Good Nurse, which was a movie, came out pretty recently. Blind Spot, Billions, 30 Rock, The Rustler. He's been in some stuff, having a good career. He's like,
good for him. He's really funny in this.
And every year you look at, if you just judge things by the year, he's in 3 or 4 things every year, pretty much since this movie came out. So that's not a bad life.
One of the great moments that he has in this movie is he really sells the idea that he's the straight-laced computer programmer. He's the guy who wants to just not fuck around. And yet, as an actor, he's a talented dancer. And so when they have that dance scene and he breaks out that breakdance move, it's magical. I love that.
Yeah, and that was improvised. They did not know know he was going to do that.
Oh, okay.
Which you could tell because that coffee table is way too close to him. Like if they knew he was going to do that, they would have dressed the set a little differently. He comes dangerously close to just like kicking that coffee table and breaking his foot.
It's a super
because he's really good.
Move.
Yeah, he's getting after it. That's some real breakdancing.
It's a killer moment.
Read that factoid before I rewatched the movie for the first time, and I was like, oh, it's probably like some silly comedy breakdancing. No, man, he's getting after it.
But it's like the one and only thing. It's just in there, and then it's over. It doesn't turn him into the dancing programmer character.
No, and it's so much better for it.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have any closing thoughts on the movie you wanted to get into?
No, I guess I don't.
Okay.
I just wanted to enjoy this movie. Like everybody knows it. We almost didn't need to do this episode, but it's fun for us to talk about. And if it reminds people that it's been a while since they've seen it, then we're doing a service to the world.
Yeah. Inherent Vice was a movie we really liked, but it was a tough nut to crack in some degree. And this was just like
that took work.
Such a breezy watch, but bad news, Ian. The breezy watches will not continue.
Oh no, we're going back in the mines.
Not saying we're doing a bad movie next week, but we're doing a movie that's a little complicated. You got to do some analysis.
Okay.
And we're doing a movie that is kind of forgotten. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't even know about it, but I have a Plex. I set my Plex to play movie trailers before a movie. And I don't know where it finds them from, but like it tries to match the tone of the movie you're watching.
That's fun.
But when I was watching Inherent Vice, one of the trailers it showed me was for a movie from 1998 called Miracle Mile.
Oh.
Which is an apocalyptic thriller / drama by Stephen Day Jarnett. It stars Anthony Edwards and Mare Winningham, and it has fantastic reviews, a really interesting premise. I was just like bringing it up to people. I was like, you see this movie Miracle Mile? Most people are like, I've never even heard of that. My friend Tim was like, that movie fucking rules. And I was like, oh, okay. Like now I want to check it out.
Strangely enough, I've seen this movie way back in the day, just rented it somehow on video, probably looking for something to try. And I remember it being dark, kind of disturbing. It's going to be really interesting to revisit.
Well, it's pretty exciting. You've seen a movie I haven't, and we're going to talk about it. I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah.
Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod wherever you find us. You can follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Email us blastzonepod@gmail.com. Any movie suggestions, feedback, pretty much anything you want to talk about, we're down.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.